Yes, please begin.
Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the FACTS flooding and stormwater presentation. We'll start getting my paper. Okay, who we are. FACTS. We are an independent group of concerned property owners who only want the truth about Fairfield Harbour and its governance. Our purpose is to respond to negative, misleading information being disseminated by individuals or groups. In our mission statement, Fairfield Action Council for Truth and Support will pursue truth and provide concerned residents with verifiable information about statements by groups or individuals concerning Fairfield Harbour. Those of you who were here in 2011 know that we had some real problems with that. And that's why the committee got started. FACTS is not connected with nor sanctioned by the Fairfield Harbour POA. We're your neighbors who are just trying to get verified and unfiltered information out to the community. And we thank you. Thank each of you for joining us today. FACTS put this program together to provide vital stormwater information for every property owner, present and potential. We do not, nor do panel members, claim to have all the answers. We don't even know all the questions, but we won't continue to investigate if called for. For any items y'all need investigated, you'll let FACTS know. We've got our address over there. We've got handouts that have our email address. They're all here. First, let me get some rules for the meeting. First rule, no blaming any person or group for any action or inaction. It's not your fault that we flooded. It's not your fault the road's bad. It's not whatever. We're not going to do that. We're just putting out information today. No finger pointing at any group or person. If someone is talking, let them talk. No interruptions, please. In short, let's do something a little different. Let's act civil to each other. Now, for those of you who have not spent hours in this room, down that hallway and to the right, you will find the bathrooms. The fire escapes for this room, down that hallway, out this door, and out the back door. Do not go straight forward. One, the door is locked, and if you can get through, you're going to be in there with the fire trucks. Lastly, refreshments are on the table to your left. There's sign-up sheets on the table by the entrance door for you to sign in. Hopefully you will be so moved by this presentation today that you will consider joining FACTS. We could use more members. We need people to help us get to the bottom of issues in the harbor and to get the truth out. And we can only do this with the help of our neighbors. So each of you are invited to join FACTS. We meet one day a month for an hour unless we have other problems. And normally we don't. Lastly, please hold your questions to the end when we will have a question and answer period. Now, I am Maury Thompson. I'm the chairperson for FACTS, also the vice chairman of the Stormwater Committee, and your master of ceremonies for this day. I'll be joined on the dais by the people who will be speaking to you. First and foremost is Mr. Ray Redness. Ray cut his teeth on controlling floodwaters and community drainage in Connecticut. 35, 45, 55, couple of years before finding his dream home here in Fairfield, right on the creek. His riverfront home received the full wrath of Hurricane Florence with its 12-foot storm surge, with minimal damage. He knows how to do it. He truly knows how to deal with the stormwater issues and has spent countless hours conferring with Fairfield Harbour homeowners about their stormwater concerns, and we are truly blessed to have him in our community and to have him here to address us today. So, without coming up with any more stuff, Ray?
Oh, that quick, huh? Thank you, Maury. And it's great to see a lot of my neighbors here. Thank you for being here. I'm not going to talk about floods because we have much better people to talk about floods than I. What I want to talk about is what happens in Fairfield Harbour during rainstorms and typical drainage aspects of how we are trying to get rid of stormwater so we don't have ponding or water doesn't get into areas of your property and your houses that you don't want. Very simply, the entire community has a system of swales. Those are gullies, ditches, call them any name that you want. They all serve the same purpose. The object of each of your individual swales is to try to conduct as much as 2 inches of rain in a 48-hour period off of your property to get it somewhere with positive drainage. I would say, guessing, there's probably 25 to 30% of the community that cannot get positive drainage because there is nowhere for the water to exit. They can't see daylight. Those swales then become retention swales. They hold the water, hopefully for no more than 3 to 5 days, so it can dissipate in the nice warmer months, evaporate, and eventually dry out. The Stormwater Committee spends a good deal of time trying to have developers, and you know what's going on here. There are literally hundreds of houses being built, and trying to hold their surveyors and engineers and, in fact, the developers to do what they say they're going to do on the plans items that we need to approve for them. And what we're looking for is that positive drainage, an easy to maintain system, because difficult to maintain isn't going to get done at all. It's hard enough to get easy to maintain stuff handled. And we go through that process before anyone can even apply for a building permit. A few years ago, we changed the regulations so that the process now comes through the Stormwater Committee. And if the Stormwater Committee is not happy with it, it doesn't even go to the Property Control Committee. We spend a good deal of time talking to people, builders, surveyors, engineers, including the person who's having a home built. We often hear that we're holding up things for them. It's taking too much time. We're costing them money. I'm sorry, but we're not. An application comes in and we review it and get back to those folks. I can't think of an incident that it took more than a week. And this is all volunteers doing this work. And we've had some mighty good people on this committee, and we still do. And they put in a good deal of time to make sure this happens. We also get an awful lot of calls of situations out in your lots, your properties, and I've probably talked to several of you, where water is sitting there, or water is coming from the next door neighbor, or water is coming off the golf course, or it's coming off the road and it's not behaving the way it should. And that's completely understandable with the state of the system that is now 50 years old and for many years has not seen consistent maintenance. And it's very hard to do that. And we're spending a lot of time trying to make up for lost time and getting those systems back in order. But it's something that each and every homeowner should be aware of and helping out with. And that is not putting stone, rocks, or plantings in your swales. Even the front swales, we see a lot of them with stones piled up in there. And we understand why. It's not hard, it's not easy to maintain that. It's even harder to mow it. But those stones are inhibiting flow. They're not helpful at all. The other thing is that a lot of these culverts, especially your driveway culverts, get clogged up. They collect debris over time, and it closes the pipe. It just goes from this, smaller and smaller and smaller, until you can barely see light from the other end, if you can. Some of those swales carry more water from other places, especially the front swale, or swales that are serving other areas through POA land. Those swales are maintained by the POA. The ones for you, in front of your houses and the sides of your houses, are supposed to be maintained by you. We can help you from time to time with how to do that and who to contact to do that, but we really can't do all that for you. It would simply take an enormous amount of time and an enormous amount of money to bring this whole system back to where it needs to be. That's going to happen slowly. So what we look at and what we try to do is take the more serious areas and look at properties that are more inclined to collect water or flood under rainstorm conditions. And we try to find out how to fix those, and we go about trying to do that. We prepare budgets each year for the POA board to go through. In those budgets, we have a list of projects that we feel are necessary and need to be done on a timely basis, and that's our approach to how we deal with the everyday ordinary drainage in the harbor. obviously, when you get a hurricane like Florence, and I think it was Irene before that, so I saw some flooding for that. There is nothing the systems in the harbor can do. They're not equipped for that. There was never an intent to handle that. Water's going to come up, water's going to go down. We live in Eastern Carolina, we're in a floodplain. And that's just something we need to live with. We intend to try to make it as good and as good working as it can. But it's a hard task, it's a long task, and we would like everybody's help. So, anytime if anybody has any questions at all, I don't know if my contact is up there, but I'm in the book. Call me. My cell phone is listed. Just call me. I will call you back. I'll come and see you, and we can talk about what your issues are. Go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Next, we have Donnie Lavelle, a planner from the Craven County Planning Department. All yours. Wow, I actually feel kind of tall today. Doesn't happen very often. Good afternoon, I'm Donnie Lavelle. I'm one of the planners for Craven County. I've got my other cohort here, William Flynn. He's one of the other planners as well. I've been with the county probably 18, 19 years at this point. I've been dealing with flood stuff for the last couple of years. I've lived in Craven County pretty much my entire life. I grew up in Havelock. I was a Marine brat, if anybody knows what that is. Went to school at East Carolina University, graduated and came back here. Lived in Boone for a small amount of time, but I won't count that. So I've been in this area my whole life. I've seen it change a lot. Seen a lot of disasters over now and then. That's just a little bit about me, and I'm going to go into our presentation. I do have in the back, there are flood brochures that we mail out yearly. There are business cards from me and Will. This is going to be a very general presentation, no real specifics. If you have specific questions about your property or anything in the area and whatnot, please give us a call, shoot us an email. I'd be more than happy to try to address those, regardless of what they are. Some of the strangest questions or some of the most interesting ones to try to figure out. And I like figuring out a problem, so you're not going to bother me. Make sure you talk. Okay, so our first slide here is FEMA, North Carolina, Craven County, and the NFIP. Some of those terms are going to be familiar, and the other ones that aren't, I'm going to tell you what they are. To be eligible for any kind of disaster assistance from FEMA, and to be able to purchase flood insurance, communities must adopt and enforce flood damage prevention standards. So if the county didn't participate in the flood insurance, or didn't participate in the flood standards, you wouldn't be able to purchase flood insurance at all. Our maps are actually created by North Carolina Emergency Management, and they're approved for use by FEMA. North Carolina is very different in that regard. Most of the states just have their maps done by FEMA. North Carolina, after Hurricane Floyd, that happened in 1999, I think. There was a big drought, and you'll see up here in just a second, a big drought between the first set of flood maps and the next set of flood maps. So North Carolina decided to try to do them themselves. Many other states are starting to follow suit with that. So hopefully the goal is to have a better product than what the federal government can provide. So what does Craven County do in all this? What we do is we enforce our flood damage prevention ordinance. We answer questions from the public like yourself, flood zones, flood requirements, you name it, I've probably heard it or will be asked it at some point.
We do deal with violations to the flood damage prevention ordinance. If someone repaired their house without getting a permit, or if someone did X, Y, or Z, it is in our purview to have to deal with that. Not my favorite part of this job, but sometimes that's got to be done. And something else we do is we provide documents yearly to FEMA to certify that we are keeping with the design standards. To give you an idea, we just sent those back in this year, so we have to do that every year, and they are very thorough, and they're very thorough. Let me just leave it at that. And something we also do is we participate in the community rating system, the CRS program, which you have no idea what that is, and I'm going to tell you. The community rating system is a voluntary program that the county participates in through higher standards. So we enforce some higher standards than what FEMA requires. Through that program, we can get discounts on your flood insurance policy. So currently, well, as of recently, we were a Class 8, but now we are a Class 7. A Class 8 gave everyone a 10% discount. A Class 7 will now give everybody a 15% discount that you should start seeing in October of this year. A lot of our staff members spent a lot of time in putting together a lot of documents, and we finally managed to get that Class 7. We wanted to be a Class 7 for a long time, but there were certain aspects of building code that really made some of that difficult. This is some basic flood information for the area. Craven County first got our first set of flood maps in 1987. Since then, we've had two other major revisions. We've had the 2004 maps and the 2020 maps. In between that time, there are some minor revisions that have taken place. Before that, and even since then. In fact, Carteret County, since we share a border with Carteret County, their new flood maps became effective. And so technically, our flood maps changed a little bit, even though there wasn't really any change in our area. During these revisions, both sets of revisions that we've had, major revisions, the BFEs, which are the base flood elevations, which is basically how high you have to go above sea level to build your structure, have increased in many areas, especially in the 2020 maps. You had BFEs, especially say in downtown New Bern, go from 8 feet to sometimes 12, 11, etc. We did see some areas in the county that the BFEs went down, specifically over in the Adams Creek area, which is in the eastern side of the county. The flood zone in that area generally decreased. BFEs went from 8 in some spots down all the way down to 6. So over specifically in Fairfield, you used to have a static BFE of 8 for everywhere that was in the special flood hazard area. That has changed. You do have some areas that have a BFE of 10 feet, 9 feet, and 8 feet. Meaning that you could be building right next to your neighbor, and your neighbor has to go to, say, 9 feet or 10 feet, and you're having to go higher than that or lower than that. It happens that way. The BFE lines go in between properties. It's specifically based on ground elevation, etc. During the last set of major revisions we've got, we did get new flood zones. Specifically, we got VE zones, we've got our coastal A zones, and we've got overwash areas, which are AOs. Those are on the military base and don't really affect many people, but we did get some new flood zones. So one question we get a lot is, how do I determine what flood zone I'm in? Well, the easiest way to do that is to call our office. We actually get points with the CRS system for every time you call in, and we give you information. So we appreciate it when you do that, but anybody in our office would be more than happy to provide you with the flood information for your house, flood information for maybe a property you're looking at. We get that a lot, especially from realtors. Hey, what's the flood zone in this property? That's something that everyone in the office really wants to help you with, and please call us. Something else you can use, which I've got a slide about this after this, is you can use the North Carolina Flood Risk Information System. It's called the NC FRIZ. If you talk to me at all, I'll talk about it a lot. It's located at that URL there, but you can also just go to Google and type in NC for is, and it will take you straight to it, and I'll have a couple of slides about that here in a minute. Something else you could do is you could choose to get an elevation certificate from an NC licensed surveyor. There's some positives to that could possibly help you on your flood insurance. It will also give you definitives for your structure, how high your finished floor is, how many flood vents you have, if you have any, how high your mechanical is, which is your electrical, HVAC, things of that nature. It does cost you money, anywhere from $400 or $500 on, depending on the surveyor. So the two options above that are free, but you don't get that nice elevation certificate that you can use for other things. So you might be curious about what is the frizz and how do you use it? Well, here's an example. Let's see, I think that was a pointer. Here's an example of the frizz. I literally grabbed a screen capture of where you will come to. Over in here in this corner, you can put your full address. That's critical. You need your city, your state, and your zip. If not, it may take you somewhere else. But if you put your city, state, and zip in there, it will carry you pretty close to where your house is located. And it will give you something that looks like this. You'll have, on this particular spot in Fairfield Harbour, you have two different flood zones. You have the blue, which is the AE zone, and you have the yellow, which is the shaded X. So you can see how these lines kind of come in and go in between structures, around structures, etc. So it is possible for your neighbor to be right next to you, be in the flood zone, and then be out of the flood zone. It happens. It will provide you some critical information up here, talking about what your elevation is, your base flood elevation. This gives you some more information about your panel. A lot of information you wouldn't really use, but it's useful if you're trying to get some more in-depth knowledge. You can even download maps from this website. It is run by the state of North Carolina. They're the ones who do the map, so this should have the most up-to-date information on there. Some things to watch out for. If you're looking for a specific lot that doesn't have a home on it, be cautious that it takes you to the right location. Lots are a little bit more difficult for it. I've seen it a lot of times where if you put in, say for instance, I'm going to go down this court, lot 12, whatever, it will take you to the start of the court and not necessarily take you down the court. But with actual homes, it works a lot better. If in doubt, always give us a call. We're more than happy to help. Let's see, so this is frizz. Okay, so we have some frequently asked questions that I get a lot. Specifically, how do we determine how high a structure's got to go when it's being built? That's one we get a lot. So if the house is being built or very close to being built in the special flood hazard area, I'm going to require that you get an elevation certificate. What that's going to do is that's going to outline the zone you're in. So if you're very close to being in the flood zone or not, it will say yes, you're in, no, you're not. If you're in, it will give you your base flood elevation. It will give you your ground elevation. Depending on how the surveyor's actually done the form, it should give us your preliminary heights of your structure, how high they plan on building it, how many flood vents they're going to have. How high is the water heater going to be elevated? How high is the electrical system going to be elevated? And we use that elevation certificate to write your flood development permit. During construction, typically you'll have a surveyor go out there and put a benchmark so everybody knows how high they have to be in the field. After everything is done, and before a final inspection is done, we will require a finished elevation certificate. This elevation certificate will now tell us your house was built at this, your machinery is elevated to this, you have X number of flood vents, and we will look at that for compliance. If, for instance, you have something that is not compliant, we will not give you a CO until it comes into compliance. We've had that problem recently with a few houses being built, so it's something that does have to get resolved from time to time, but for the most part, everything goes along really smoothly. Our next question that we have is, do you need a permit to repair your flood damaged home? Yes, you need a permit to repair your flood damaged home. If your contractor tells you you don't need a permit, you need to call us and ask us. There are some instances where you might not need a permit, but for the vast majority of them, you need a permit for it. I can't tell you how many people have come after the fact and said, hey, I'm trying to get the records of my permits that were pulled for my home repair. Well, it doesn't look like you got any permits. Oh, well, my contractor was supposed to do that. Well, they say a lot of things, they don't always do that. Always feel free to give us a call. My contractor's telling me I don't need a permit. You can always ask us and we'll let you know. And a side note is those permits are typically free. That determination is typically made right after a flooding event or right after a disaster, but typically they are free after a disaster. Another thing we get is, do you have an elevation certificate for my house? Well, I have a lot of elevation certificates, well over 1,000 at this point that we've scanned in our system, dating all the way back to 1987. Now, the further back you get, the less we have, but we have a ton of them. If you're looking, give us a call. It takes less than 10 minutes to figure out if we have them or not. And we do get CRS points for having all of those on file and easy to access. Another question we get is, I have an older elevation certificate. Is it still good? That's a little bit tougher of a question. Are they still a document that is certified? Yes. Is necessarily all that information still up to date? Probably not. It can be useful in determining how high your floor is, etc. But even that can be difficult at times. To not get into too many details, if you've got an elevation certificate before 2004, the elevations are off because they've changed the calculations of the curvature of the earth. And I can go into more details than that if anybody's inclined to ask. Some other questions we'll get is, what is a freeboard and why do we have them? Well, a freeboard is an additional requirement that's part of that CRS program where, say for instance, your BFE is 8, we would require you to go to 10 feet instead of being at 8. It is basically an increased height that you have to go for mechanical, for your living space, for flood-proofing materials, etc. That is one of the things that we get that offers some of the most points that we can to get that flood discount higher for y'all. And on the plus side, it makes your homes not safe, but safer from flooding. That is all I have. Again, I'm Donnie Lavelle. This is William Flynn. Our phone number is 252-636-6618. And then our email addresses are there. If you have any specific questions, please ask. I enjoy answering them, and I know that Will does too. So appreciate it, and have a great day, y'all.
Thank you, Donnie. Okay, Donnie covered all of Will's presentation. So, don't luck out. You only got to hear one.
Makes my life easy.
But, unfortunately, Heather Thornburg from Wade Associates is on up now. So we need to get this.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Heather Thornburg. I work with Wade Associates. Just a little bit about myself. I have been in the insurance industry for almost 20 years. Started out at another agency. I was there for 13 years and did service. Yes, sir.
Can you move your mic a little bit closer to?
Is that better?
A little
Can you
bit
hear me
better.
now?
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I was with the other agency for about 13 years, and during that time, Florence hit. And so, backing up a little bit, I'm a local. I was born in Jacksonville, but I have lived in eastern North Carolina, mostly New Bern, all my life, New Bern for 30 years. During Florence, there was a change in the insurance industry that I had not witnessed in a period of time that I've been there. During that time, it was all hands on deck, and we had people coming in who had homeowners insurance, condo owner insurance, and thought that they had what they needed. And we quickly discovered that they didn't. A lot of people had a lot of misconceptions about what insurance does, how it works, and what they were covered for and what they weren't covered for. So sitting across a desk from someone who's just lost everything and telling them I can't help them was probably a pivotal moment in my career. Fast forward a little bit. For the last 5 years, I switched over to Wade Associates. And at Wade Associates, I do a little bit of both things. So I sell insurance, but I also service it. So I'm kind of a one-stop shop. You come to me, you land with me. On to the insurance industry and what's different. There's not a lot of change, to be honest with you, the last couple of years. Things that since Risk Rater 2.0 came about, there have been some changes. For example, you aren't required to have an elevation certificate, but I will tell you that the absence of an elevation certificate makes the system very intuitive, meaning that it's going to make decisions that may or may not be accurate. And so the elevation certificate might provide information that the system may not gather on its own. So you may do better to have an elevation certificate. I can't tell you to spend that extra money, but the end game is it could result in better premiums for you. The other thing that we do know is that grandfathering in, when there is an existing flood policy in place and you buy a property, take theirs on, roll it over, make changes if you need to, but take that on first. We did see a little bit of shift with 2.0. Some people's premiums, flood premiums, went through the roof. And some people, actually, it got cheaper. So we saw a mixed bag. It was a little bit of everything. The biggest thing that I want to tell you today is that I can't control for you what the weather's going to do. And I can't control for you what FEMA's going to pay. But what you can control is evaluating what you own, what you have, what kind of shape it's in, mitigating that risk, deciding what things you can fix, what you need to fix, what you need to do to protect your property, and then insure the things that you can't. So recognizing that insurance is not intended to make you better. It's intended to restore you back to where you were. That's a hard thing to hear, I think. I think we all, want it to be better, but the reality is that insurance companies don't pay out that way. It's not the way it works. They're going to give you back what you lost or as close to it as they can. The other bad news is that FEMA is probably not going to save your day. I mean, the reality is that they're probably going to be able to get you something, but they're not going to be able to save you either. My daughter, who's 22 years old, lives in Asheville. And so as a mother, one of the hardest things I ever had to watch was Helene come through and go bonkers and tear through the community that she lives in. 90% of those people didn't have flood insurance because they don't live in a flood zone. Well, I'm here to tell you that every single person in this room is at risk for flood. It may not be because the river's rising. It could be because a culvert overflows, or because that side ditch that's intended to flow water off of your property just reaches its over a sustainable level. But every person is at risk for flood. If you are in a designated flood zone, obviously you're probably going to qualify for NFIP and have to get a standard flood policy, which is going to cover your building. If you don't live in a flood zone, maybe you can get a private flood policy, and that private flood policy may be a little bit more expensive or a little less expensive than NFIP policy, but it'll cover an outbuilding. It'll give you some loss of use. It'll put you in a place to stay, which is one of the things that we saw during Florence. People were displaced and didn't have the funds to pay for housing or for the lost expenses they had because they were displaced. So my advice to you is, if you do not know what you have, sit down and talk with someone. I may not be your agent, but I will look at what you have and I will tell you what you have. And I will see if we have a better option. I'm not here to sell insurance to you because that's not what I want to do. I want to sleep with me at night. And I don't ever want to have to sit across from another one of my community members and tell them they don't have what they need. So that's my presentation today. Is there anything else? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. That was some good information. I was hoping not to hear. But what can I say? It's the truth, and that's the thing. We don't know what the risk is a lot of times. We think we're covered. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. Okay, next we have Betsy DiNardo from Neuse Realty, who's going to give us a little information on the realtor side.
Yes, I'm short. Hi, everyone. You have learned much from Ray, Donnie, and Heather. Now, to apply that information on buying or selling a home in Fairfield Harbour. Whether buying or selling, a knowledgeable real estate agent should be able to assist you through determining your flood status. We learned about the Craven County flood risk information, FRIS, bottom through Donnie, and that's their number once again. There's another program that is associated with the North Carolina MLS for realtors, but you can also get it for the public for a fee, and it's called My Flood Status. That's okay, I have my handyman Joe in there. My Flood Status arms a well-informed realtor and consumer with accurate information on a specific property. Although the information can be technically challenged, right, Joe?
Right.
Joe went on the system himself and tried to get some information. And he got it. It was just hard for him to understand a lot of the information. A buyer's agent can access the information for houses that you're considering buying, and your listing agent can have this information on hand.
Next slide.
Yes, please. Your listing agent can have this information on hand so you can disclose an accurate, certified, and insured My Flood Status flood zone determination report. And Heather has addressed a couple of these issues about ratings versus requirements. And then, next one please. What you do if you need to challenge your flood status. Now, North Carolina is a caveat emptor state, or let the buyer beware. It places the burden of due diligence on the buyer's shoulders. According to North Carolina law, sellers are required to fill out, the Residential Property and Owners Association disclosure. The 6-page form was most recently updated in July of 2024 to include more specific disclosures about flooding issues. There are 8 sections which the sellers are required to fill out to the best of their knowledge: structural, HVAC and electric, plumbing and septic, fixtures and appliances, land and zoning, elevation and flooding, miscellaneous, and owners association. And the section on elevation and flooding is most relevant to today's discussion. And there are some copies of the new property owner's disclosure here at the desk, and we can send you some if you're interested in obtaining that information. For example, number 5 is the property located in a federal or other designated flood zone. So the sellers are check off 1, yes, there is an issue. 2, there is no issue. Or 3, no representation. No representation is checked if the seller is not aware of any issue. But the seller can also disclose, choose not to disclose that and say no representation. If a realtor knows of any material defect, he or she is required to disclose that information even if the seller chooses not to. The realtor is not allowed to fill out this form for you. The seller is required to do that on their own. This form is part of a listing package available to buyers before you, when you're looking at the property. When purchasing a home, buyers need to read this disclosure, although a lot of times it may say no representation through the whole checklist of 6 pages. And then the buyer's best interest is to do a home inspection, even for new construction. Many sellers are doing pre-listing home inspections so that they are aware of any major issues and can address them prior to placing their homes on the market. A few yellow flag issues that are in the disclosure are: 1, they ask the length of time that the property has been owned. A shorter period of time, less than a year or so, can signal maybe it's a flipped property. And then the other question is whether there were building permits pulled for renovations. And Donnie pretty much addressed that issue. It's possible to go on the Craven County site to see if permits were obtained. The site lists permits. It's an online site now, lists permits that go back to 2002. Donnie?
I think 2.
You can't go, they don't have access to prior to 2002, but you can go on the site and you can pull up an address and you can see what permits were pulled by the year. Like if you wanted to go into 2020 or 2019, which happened, after Florence, you can go on there and look up the property and say, okay, yes, there was an HVAC permit pulled, there was a building permit pulled, there was, whether the room was added on or not with permit. And a well-informed realtor can help you go through that process as well. Along with resales and new construction homes that are being bought and sold in Fairfield Harbour, there are many vacant lots still. And Margaret will talk to you about vacant lots and a new vacant lot disclosure. And she's going to talk to you from over there.
1. Thank you, Betsy. I get a special dispensation because I've had 3 joint replacements. I will admit to being 75 years old, and I will admit to having come here, Tom, what did we agree, 37 years ago, when my father sold me Neuse Realty and the building in which it still is housed. We have made some improvements. You'll want to know that. I'd like to also say a warm welcome to all of my friends and neighbors who are here today, some of whom are also clients of our firm. I'd also like to cordially point out that I have 2 or 3 or 4 of my colleagues in the room today, which is greatly appreciated. Joe said to me, just tell them why Form 142 matters. And I said, okay, I could do that, not just the mechanics of the form. Oh, by the way, is 142 up there?
Yeah,
We're going to get one part of 142 up there so you can see the relevant section on flooding, land, and so forth. A couple of questions that are particularly telling. This is a brand new form that went into effect on July 1st of 2024, not yet required. We expect it will be very shortly. It is a recommended best practice for our industry. Take a look if you can. I'm going to read it for you. I picked 2 questions out of the 4-page form. This is under Section E, Environmental Aspects. Wetlands, streams, or other features, permits or certifications related to wetlands, conservation stream restoration. That's question 9, same thing. Issue, no representation. Question 10, coastal concerns, tidal waters, unbuildable land, flood zone, CAMA, Army Corps, etc. If yes, describe in detail. Again, the responsibility for this form falls to the owner of the land to fill out, and when it becomes required, as we expect it will in 25, when the new forms are reported out, it will be the realtor's responsibility. We will be held accountable for what is on the form to in fact be true. Now, so why does all of this matter? I would like to find my notes. There we are. All forms, by the way, that we've talked about today that accompany any real estate transaction are mandated by statute. They are created by joint volunteers from the Bar Association and the North Carolina Realtors Association, working together, meeting 5 or 6 times a year, and coming up with their magic by July 1 of every year. There were a total of 34 new forms introduced to our industry this past July. I like 142. I don't feel the same way about some of those others. And I'll tell you why this one can make sense and under what circumstances it might. I picked 5 circumstances, situations, if you will. First of all, for a seller, if you don't provide the form, remember it's still voluntary, the buyer can rescind any offer within 3 days for no reason and not give you any money when he ties up your property under contract. So that's one good reason, particularly if you're dealing with a very desirable location in a very desirable subdivision, that you might want to be at the ready with the form. The second consideration that a seller might have is to know what he's got. If you've heard all of these speakers today, each one in his own way has said, know what you have. It is the only power that as an owner you truly bring to the table. So, a seller needs to know what his land is worth if he wants to put a proper price on it. A realtor can help you do that, but we also know that for many years, realtors did not have a lot of data about, and they didn't go find it, about what a vacant land was. We're in a very different era now. So I believe, and I think that the seller needs to know what it is he has to sell in the marketplace and put that price on it. The second circumstance or group of people that benefit from 142 is the real estate broker for the seller. Sure, it helps protect us against malpractice, sloppy, not doing our homework right on what it is that you have, using the tools that are out there. But it helps us best explain when we're asked by someone in our industry, not necessarily our office or our brand, why that price is so high. We put an interior lot through the storm under contract in Birdland for $40,000. Interior. That is very good news. In an environment that has been $5,000, $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, you got up to $30,000 and you thought you were in Nirvana. That was the pricing history that was allowed to happen here, and I'll tell you why in a minute, at least through my eyes. The third group of people that are going to benefit from 142 are the buyers. No lot is like the other lot. No buyer can possibly figure out his budget to build what it is that he's buying the lot with the intent to do without knowing his correction costs. We know that in this harbor, $20,000 to $25,000 of correction costs are not unusual in the so-called challenged lots. We would all agree on that, right? Yet, in a place like Fairfield Harbour, it is assumed that everything which is billable is buildable. But rules change, interpretations vary. local policies change, and our knowledge base increases. My father told me in the 80s that the time would come when marginal lots, then sitting vacant with no interest whatsoever, would one day become listed and sold. Whether it is a caveat emptor state or not, the times now call for disclosure. It is expected that Form 142, and I said this before, though not mandatory, will become so. The fourth category of person or situations that will benefit from 142 is the buyer's broker. His job is to obtain the best conditioned site for what is the intention of the buyer to build that he can in the marketplace. His job is also to assist him to ask the right questions of a spec builder as to what was done to get that lot remedied for it to contain, except a spec house. So 142 is a very good form as a guideline, as a checklist to have. One of my colleagues is in the room, Lexi. We're working on a situation in Moore's Farm, down in a small subdivision called Cypress Bay off of Adams Creek. That was another failed subdivision in that it did not sell all of its vacant offerings within a 2 or 3 year time period. The last lot is 4.5 acres of absolutely magnificent Neuse River views, and we are in a prolonged due diligence period now because our buyer asked for Form 142, we did. Form 142 was utilized by that listing broker, but everything was no representation. We used that then to ask for a 90-day look-see period, the so-called due diligence period, so that we could gather all of the information that the seller had not gathered. That includes homeowner association interviews, will the footprint of the house that he wants fit on the available upland. Heather, you will be pricing his insurance for him, and so forth. So that when he's all done building $750,000 worth of improvement on it, he will know that he was treated well by his HOA, all of his plans were reviewed before he closed on the lot to know what would be permitted and so forth. Now that's why I think 142 is a really good tool for 5 different situations. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of history. Joe says I can't take 10 minutes per decade. Think about that. So I'm going to zip through this pretty quick. I came in '88. By '91, Fairfield Communities was in bankruptcy. By '92, '93, we had 500 active lots in our MLS at the time for sale. Priced from $1,000 to all the way up to waterfront, which never really lost its value because it was incredibly finite and everybody knew it, unlike interior wooded lots in Fairfield. They didn't look finite at all. So the glut that was allowed to be created here actually began with the developer. If you think about it, there were 4 developers, the last of which was Fairfield Communities, bankrupt in '91. They plotted out 24 taxable parcels plus the peninsula, which is townhouses, condos, and 208 doors of timeshare. In that initial planning, which actually was phased in over the 4 developers, Fairfield did all of Harbor Point 1 and 2, what we call that now, and they did all the peninsula. They did all the timeshare development, Westinghouse didn't, Great Northern didn't, and so forth. So the opportunity was there when the right players came around to purchase these lots utilizing a land bank system, which allows investors to buy from the land bank, which is an entity that is created for the purpose of aggregating lots to be sold later. That's what a land bank is. There's perfectly legal, there's absolutely, it's really quite brilliant in certain circumstances, I think. So those people, those kinds of people began to show up in the late aughts. We had the first land bank created, and I know this because he told me he created it in 2009. The wholesaler, that is the middleman, or you could call him a deed swapper, or pick a name, doesn't matter. He is attracted to this line of work because he doesn't have to risk any of his money. The investors are using their IRA money to buy into the land bank, which is also perfectly legal. So if you were to take a rainy afternoon and go down to the deed office, you could flip through several scores or hundreds of lots that are still held in the name of Midland Trust, or whatever, Midland Trust, I'll just pick one. At one time, I would quit counting at over 200 of the trusts. Okay, so there you have the how of it, the why of it, the circumstances that allowed it to happen. I will contrast that with, say, Greenbrier. When Weyerhaeuser developed that in the late 80s, they were just getting started when I arrived. And my father was fascinated and knew all of the Weyerhaeuser guys. They said, we're not going to make the same mistakes that Fairfield has made. If you don't build on the lot that we're going to sell you, we will buy it back from you within a period of time. And I don't remember what that was, a year or two or whatever. That is called the buyback provision the developer puts in place to avoid a glut, simply put. Let's fast forward now to 2019. All of that work that's been going on for 10 years in the land bank is now going to start to bear fruit. You will start to see the appearance of the regional builders to come in and buy lots and put spec houses up. And the first one was Capital City. And I remember them well because the very first house on Caracara, to the right, was seriously flooded during Florence. They were just coming out of the ground. Later, 9 houses later, they decide that this is not for them in Fairfield, but they did like New Bern. Out of Raleigh they were, and they're now successfully building in what is called Bell Oaks. So that's Capital City. They ended up with 10. L5 out of Cary came in, they did 6, it wasn't for them, and they went back. And we had an Atlanta group come in. They were north of 45 lots, not terribly successful in their endeavor. All of those 44 went back on the market. And we had Mr. Trewick, and he was going to be here today, and I would have certainly introduced him. He was also brought here by a wholesaler, Hughes Walker. He saw things differently, though. He saw it as a long-term place to stay, move his business out of the Surf City area, and become, if you will, a resident of this part of Eastern North Carolina. So, he buys his lots no longer from the land bank guys. He buys them as he sees them. He works with all developers across, all realtors across the board. That is how he makes his independent decisions about what is a buildable lot and whether he can afford to pay the correction costs. 3 years before they got here, D.R. Horton said, no, we're not coming to this place. We like to create our neighborhoods ground up. We do our own thing. We don't want a hodgepodge of lots from different locations throughout your harbor. 3 years later, they did in fact close on upwards of 50. They stopped at 40. And yes, they are here near West New Bern, doing a whole other subdivision out there. They like Craven County. Adams Homes signed on for 100. They are building 100, and every single of lots that they bought were engineered by a premier engineering company before they closed. There was no doubt in the Adams family as to, sorry, I couldn't help myself, as to what they were getting and what they would be able to build and what they would need to charge for it. So that's Adams. And then just a couple weeks ago, the Dream Home Finder signs went up on Broad Creek Road, very close to my office. As a matter of fact, most of the signage on Broad Creek Road is very close to my house. In any case, they're in for 127. They closed on 19 lots in mid-December of '24. So those are the players as they currently stack up. It has been reported that one of those builders, and I'm not at liberty and I wouldn't want to tell you if I really knew, that one of those builders was sufficiently unhappy with the bank of lots that they bought in bulk, that they reported to the Real Estate Commission of our state that they were not properly told what it was that was in their bundle in the purchase. And because of that, they would not be able to continue in the location of Fairfield Harbour. And they cited this location. Now, in order for the Forms Committee to get real excited about this stuff, this has to be reported from a number of other locations around the state, and it did happen. And the Forms Committee people share with us, and Miriam, who runs the Real Estate Commission, comes and talks to us, and she tells us a little bit about what happens in the field that causes the committees to respond, because their job is, after all, consumer protection. That's why 142 matters. It is a brand new response to what is happening as the coastal wetland situation changes in front of our very eyes. That's all I got.
Very good. Very good.
Well, Margaret, thank you very much for doing all this very smarter. Now it'll be the good part. Any questions for any of the board members? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Chris Skrutsky. I'm at 5108 Bucko Reef Road, which is up Northwest Creek between the marsh and the swamp. And we have a stilt house, 14-foot elevation for our living level. And after Florence, our flood insurance paid us $96,000 for assorted systems that were flooded in the garage level of the house, HVACs and garage doors and things of that nature. Electrical, lots of electrical. My question is, every time I get a statement now from my flood insurance, they say, you've used up $96,000 of your insurance. And I see that coming to me annually, and so I'm not really sure how to evaluate the cost of my flood policy, which has gone up a whopping $25, but am I paying for a full policy worth, or is it $96,000 less than the full policy? I don't know how to interpret that information.
Please use the microphone.
I would have to look at it and dig in a little bit, but so that limit is given to you annually. So if there was a flood tomorrow and you needed $250,000 or whatever your limited insurance is, you should have that full limit. Correct, or whatever that limit is, and everybody doesn't purchase the full $250, but you should have up to that limit. But I'd be happy to take a look at it for you and have a card for that.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. Thank you. This is for Ray. Ray, you mentioned the need for remediation of the stormwater system, the swales and all those kinds of things. But that costs money. And we've got next week the annual budget presentation from the POA to all the owners around. So my question to you is, are you getting enough money from the POA, not perhaps next year, but over several years planned, to actually remediate the whole system and bring it back to where it's supposed to be. Thank you.
I certainly hope so. It's difficult this year, as you know, it's a very difficult year. And we have prepared budgets for the next 2 sessions that list the improvements that we feel are most needed in the harbor and will affect the most amount of people positively. Are we getting enough money? I don't really think that there's a clear understanding of what's really needed here to bring these flood systems back up to, even just to bring them to where they were designed to be, let alone make any improvements. Things happen around here very, very quickly, as you know. There's a couple of months ago, several months ago, we had 11.5 inches of rain in 5 days. I mean, that was a significant amount of water. And everybody, my phone just never stopped. And that's okay. I want to know. Everybody on my committee wants to know. We go out and look all the time at what's going on. That's why I know I see an awful lot of things that are not maintained. And that all people are guilty of it. The POA is guilty of it. Each landowner is guilty of it. Not that some of you even knew. But it's a big job, and it's going to take all of us to get this to where it needs to be. I'm hopeful, Richie, and I'm glad you asked the question. I'm hopeful that that over time here, over the next several years, we will be building back that infrastructure and get those protections to the extent that we can. Again, you get a, I hate to use these terms because they're confusing for people. You get what's known as a 100-year storm, and everybody says, well, that's only going to happen once every 100 years. That's not the way it works. A 100-year storm has a 1% chance of happening any given year. And you could have 5 of them in 1 year and then not have another one for 20 years. And it'd still be a 100-year storm. So there are several levels of storms below that. 50-year, 20-year, 10-year, 5-year, 2-year, 1 year. All of those things need to be handled to an extent. You're not going to protect yourself in Eastern Carolina in a floodplain for a 100-year storm. You can build above it, but the ground is just too low. And there's an awful lot of areas within Fairfield Harbour that are barely above mean-high water. Barely above. We have elevations here that are in the 2s. So it doesn't take much to get water to come inland on us. So, is there enough right now? No. I'm hopeful there will be, and I look forward to being able to spend some of it. Thank you, Ray.
Go ahead. Hi, my name is Phil Katz. I live on Plymouth Court, and I'm on Northwest Creek. And when we purchased our house, which was unfortunately a year before Florence, something happened, and we got an insurance adjuster came representing our insurance company, and he walked in and he said, you know, based on the construction of your home, and I had never heard this before, based on the construction of my home, I could probably get everything covered on the lower level. The house was raised up like 12 or 13 feet. And I couldn't understand what he was talking about. And he said, well, all of the drywall and all the insulation, because the previous owners had finished, unfortunately, the ground level of the home. He said, and that's good news or it's bad news, because what you have to do is you have to change the construction description of the home so that the insurance company knows that it's in compliance with their construction regulations or requirements for different types of insurance coverage, and this is FEMA flood insurance. I had no idea what he was talking about. I asked my agents, no one could answer me. And I'm wondering if there's some hidden information about home construction and flood insurance regarding different types of coverage that are available based on the construction of the home. It has something to do with the way they raise, my understanding, the way they raise the house, whether it's on pilings, whether it's on cement footings. There's all different kinds of construction descriptions. And I'm not a home builder, and I have no clue what they're talking about. But I would think that that'd be pretty valuable information for someone that would be purchasing a house on the water or close to the water, or just how to buy your insurance policy.
None of us up here can give you a 100% answer without looking at the previous homeowner's policy and the policy that you were expecting to buy, or whichever company the insurance adjuster was representing, whatever they typically give you. What our office typically sees is that there's a direct relationship as the home is built to more stringent flood development regulations. So it's elevated more, it's using pressure-treated lumber, more flood-resistant materials. Those things can benefit your flood insurance either by what's covered or the rate that you're paying or any number of things. So we can speak to that general trend, but we can't give you a 100% answer without looking at your actual.
And I'll add something to it too. That's exactly what I was, as I was thinking about what you were talking about, my initial thought without seeing anything is that perhaps it was rated incorrectly. And that's how the policy was written. I can't be sure without seeing it or having the data. But one thing is for sure, you can have that reviewed and evaluated. And I think you said that you did speak with your agent and they couldn't really speak to it either. Okay. Another thing that happens in catastrophic events, and I do want to kind of bring this to light because this is important. When we have a catastrophe, a lot of times the adjusters that are involved in a catastrophic event aren't necessarily employed by your company that you're writing insurance, that you've got your coverage written with. These are outside adjusters that are brought in during catastrophic. We saw tons of it during Florence. And some of those decisions had to be challenged because they were, not from here even. So, they weren't used to what our circumstances are, what our environment is like. And so there were a lot of factors that kind of played into that. So I think that there may have been more than one issue involved with the adjustment of your claim. But that's the best I can speak to it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
This is for Ray. My name is Tom Lilly. I live at 5008 Plymouth Court and have for many years. I want to give a shout out to Ray because since he has been on the Stormwater Committee, things have happened. I worked for approximately 20 or 25 years to get that culvert put in under Plymouth Court to run from our side of where the houses are to where the woods are and where the drainage ditch is. I had at least 2 different POA maintenance managers committed to doing something about it, and they both retired finally. And it wasn't until Ray came and it finally did it. So that was a 20-year quest that happened in about, I guess, 6 months after Ray took over. Thank you, Ray. my neighbor Phil. We could have discussed this in private, but I think I have the answer to your question. The house. It's basically, with your house built on pilings, then FEMA will not cover the damage to your house that's underneath the house at ground level. Their attitude is you shouldn't, I shouldn't say attitude, their regulation is you shouldn't build it in there. And if you enclose anything in there, it has to be those breakable walls. What do you call them, Diane?
Breakaway.
And that's about it. It's pretty simple. If you're on pilings, you're not supposed to enclose that stuff. If you enclose it, it's at your own risk. Now, they will cover your mechanicals, air conditioning, water softener, that kind of stuff. But they won't cover your lawnmower, or your hammer, or electric tools, of which I have gotten rid of and don't use anymore. Now that something happens, I hire somebody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, it's really interesting for me because if I started walking towards Tom's house and Tom started walking towards my house, we'd meet at Fell and Linden.
Cindy? Cindy?
My name is Jim Abel, 906 Coral Court. We lost our house in Florence and rebuilt on a concrete foundation 14 feet in the air. I have dropped flood insurance because when I studied it, it looked like the only thing it was going to pay for was my hot water heater. $600 a year, I can buy a new hot water heater every year. Did I make a mistake?
Yes, they're more than $600.
I forgot about the price of eggs, sorry.
Well, I'm an insurance person, so again, I will reiterate that every person in this room should have flood insurance. And it will replace more than that. If it does come in and there is any type of damage to the subflooring, of the wall, there could be other issues aside from just that, just your HVAC unit. So I would definitely say that it would be worth the $600 a year. Or hot water heater, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Tom Graves, I live in 815 Pelican. Is there a plan, a budget? I understand that there's some swales that are good, bad, and indifferent, and there's some that turn a lot into a waterfront home unintentionally. But is there a plan where they've gone out and surveyed lots and said it needs to be fixed, it needs to be better, so that we can plan ahead for what's going to be going on down the road?
No, you look like you were going to speak for me. Hi, Tom, how are you?
Good.
Yes, there are plans. There was quite a number of studies that have been done over the years. There was a fairly comprehensive study that was done in 2009, which looked at all of the drainage areas within the community. It was done by a company that's still in business, still around, and we use a lot of those plans for base information. What we see out there these days is that things have changed since 2009. Things have changed significantly. Swales and culverts and whatnot have deteriorated. There are an awful lot of underground drainage pipe in this area. That was all done with corrugated metal. It is all rotting, all of it. And it will all need to be replaced. We look at areas and have studied areas. We've done our own surveying, and we have hired a surveyor to do certain things. There are some plans. Richie, you asked the question, is there going to be enough money? there's going to need to be, in my estimation, between $4 and $5 million worth of work needs to be done in this harbor to bring all of this drainage infrastructure back to working condition. How long is that going to take? However long it takes to be able to do it, and each year that it's delayed, it costs more. So I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but that's the reality of it.
But is there a plan? It sounds like it's just going to knee-jerk, this needs fixing, that needs fixing, we'll take care of this and that. Is there a plan where you quantify, we got this, it's going to cost this?
Not in the sense of an overall comprehensive plan of the entire harbor. No. That in and of itself can't be funded right now.
But you have no idea of what it would cost because you don't know how many there are, is that correct?
How many
culverts, let's say, need replacing or fixing?
We have our observed numbers of how many linear feet of swales there are that need remediation. It's a rough guess. We have, what, 36 miles of roads. Think about, there's at least one swale on one side of every one of those roads. There are countless swales that go between the developed lots and the golf course, be it the old golf course or the current golf course. So there are many, many miles of swales needing remediation. And a lot of the cross culverts on our roads, many of which have been replaced. The corrugated metal has been replaced with double wall high density polyethylene pipe, which is much longer lasting, very strong, and much lighter, so it's easier to get people to be able to do it. Systematically, we're attacking things, but your comment about knee-jerk reactions is fairly accurate. We do put out fires. We don't have any choice. When something is really bad and there is an impending or a problem in process, we need to deal with it. Is that a knee-jerk reaction? Kind of, I think it fits in that category. We call it putting out fires.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael in the back corner, on us. Oh, I'm sorry.
While they're getting Mike up, I have a question for Ray. Ray, can you tell us the challenge of moving water that's from a 9-foot height down to the inner harbor when it's a mile long? That's a challenge. And how can you do that? How can that take the water from up on Cara, carry it down the old golf course, and get it into the inner harbor when you're only dropping 4 feet?
That's the challenge. That is exactly the challenge.
Yeah. Cindy.
We dealt with the swell last year and a half ago or so. It was behind Santa Domingo. And it had a lot of pockets, of low-lying pockets where water would sit. And of course, when mosquitoes are breeding, where are they breeding? In still water. We brought in a significant amount of fill to try to take that profile and drag a line from the top of that swale area up on the golf course around a very sharp corner and out underneath Pelican and out into the harbor. It was about 1,860 linear feet long. All right? And we had 3.4 feet of drop. So when the DOT tells you, oh, well, swales will only work if you can get a 2% slope, we couldn't get 0.2%. So it is extremely difficult. This place is flat.
Yeah, and the cost to pump, a pumping station is not a question.
The costs are high, there's no question. There is an area that we are actually exploring having to use a pump. Using mechanical means to move surface water is not something you really want to do. You want this stuff to operate automatically. I should say automatically. Water comes down, water hits the ground, water flows away. If you have to try to collect it and pump it to get out of an area, you're just opening yourself up for a significant amount of upfront money to build it, high maintenance money to keep it all running, and the possibility of failure when it doesn't work. So if you can avoid it, I mean, that's just basic engineering practice. If you can avoid mechanical means, you do it.
And with that, thank you, Ray. I think we have another question over there too. Michael?
Michael Lanyon, Neuse Realty, and also a resident for the past, this go around 12 years. So I lived in a house that was built in '82 on Cara. Backside goes to the wildlife refuge or hunting club. And as we've all seen, some of these new constructions have caused some flooding in older homes, or the runoff ditches are just not suitable anymore for the good flow. And so when it comes to the homeowner now, and I'm sure this has got to be one of the big plans and the concerns for the future. But I've been working as a real estate agent, so I'm working to help other people, other buyers, other sellers. And now I'm starting to concentrate on my house. It was built in '82, and it's starting to fail. So I'm looking at costs and thinking, oh wow, I got a lot of costs. And so Don educated me. It's in the plan for the back runoff ditch. I don't know if anybody else here is on Cara, the back side, but our backyards are flooding more since Florence than they ever have. And on that back side of Cara, 1840 Cara, right there by Petite Court. Yeah, Petite Terre. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, I know I probably need a better drainage from my yard to go to that back drainage ditch, but then that's cost. And does that fall on me? Do I look forward to the POA or Fairfield Harbour or I mean, because if I do my drainage, Don said I could go back there to that drainage ditch that's not technically on my property and clean it out. But then my drainage ditch is going to be clean and everybody else's isn't, so then the water's just going to naturally go to mine. And I know that's one of the big costs of the $4 million, $5 million, because that backside drainage ditch is horrible. It's completely clogged. In some places it's, but that's used to be marsh.
I think we're back to you for.
I don't know, I got so
right back at you.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, I hear you.
The situation out on that side of Cara is actually fairly interesting in one aspect. We have waived a number of requirements for people to put in driveway culverts out there because they are completely useless. So we're having them design the drainage so that it flows to that back ditch. Once that's done and the homeowners are in there, and like you're finding now, since 1982, maybe nothing was ever done. And it's whatever swale was carrying adequate water. Now, the swales literally, to carry the amount of water we're talking about, need to have a slope of 4 feet horizontal for 1 foot vertical, okay, 4 on 1. And so that they need to be at their juncture about 8 inches deep. And that'll take the 2 inches in 48 hours. That's what the design criteria is. Some areas, some swales between houses are larger because they are taking more than just your lot and your neighbor's lot. There may be water coming from other places going out there. Those are on you. The big swale out in the back there is in dire need of a clean out and regrading and some protection so it doesn't erode. And it's not the only one. You mentioned Petite Terre. There's a swell that goes around that cul-de-sac, comes around and goes behind houses on the rest of the way down Cara. And that whole thing doesn't have enough slope to move anything. Water sits in there all the time. And it gets out to a series of ponds on the old golf course and eventually makes its way out, discharge to some of the Northwest Creek, some to the Inner Harbor, some of those areas, not just Cara, but go to Spring Creek. They all try to get out to water where it's working. Now, what happens when we have a strong northeast wind and the water is rising in the harbor and in Northwest Creek and in the Neuse River? Because if you think about it, when wind's coming from the northeast, it's pushing water down Pamlico Sound. And that is a lot of water being pushed right to where? The southwest end of Pamlico Sound, which is where the Neuse River flows out. So when that water's being pushed down and the Neuse River's trying to flow out, it's got nowhere to go but up. And when that happens, all of the swales that discharge out into those waters fill up because the water needs to go somewhere. That's what we're faced with here.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray. That's the question.
That's what folks will be.
Okay.
Hi, Steve Burton, I live on 915 Hurricane Court. During Florence, our house was flooded. We had like 4 foot of water in the house. So, it was pretty much gutted. Anyway, long story short, I raised it 6 feet. It's now at an elevation of 12 and a half feet. We went to get insurance back. Our insurance was through Allstate, which was great. It did great. But our partner here, FEMA, when we went to get the insurance back, my first quote was $500. Okay. So I go take pictures of all the house inside, and we're on a 3-way call with the FEMA agent, and she said, well, you painted the walls in your garage. Now, the walls are 8 feet in the air, it's all bumped below that. And I said, yeah, we put a primer on it. And she said, well, that makes that a living area, and now your insurance is going to be like $5,800. So, how do I fight this? How do I get this reevaluated?
I'm sorry that happened. They do consider it finished space once you finish it with a paint or primer or whatever, and so they view it differently. Seems ridiculous.
Can I just take the sheet rock down?
I mean, maybe. Think that might work. I mean, maybe. Yeah. It could.
FEMA's really the only one that can answer that one.
Yes, not something I can do, but I can definitely, I would, it might be worth a try. I mean, for the $1,000 in savings.
Hey, we got time for 2 more questions.
I probably wouldn't do anything because FEMA might be going bye-bye. Well, from my understanding, all flood insurance goes through FEMA.
We have a question.
But that didn't affect, that wouldn't affect your NFIP flood load. So that's part of the problem.
Well, it's my understanding that FEMA does cover everybody's flood insurance, so even if you get private insurance, it's all paid out and goes through FEMA. You know, I right now are a Hurricane Florence victim. Next month, I will be 6 years sitting on Rebuild NC. However, they finally fired Laura Hogshead, yay! And, which was not brought to the East Coast. So anybody that's been keeping up with Western NC knows that they purposely did not put Western NC into Rebuild. Well, what was coming next? Her hearing. They asked her to resign. She said no. They terminated her anyway. So right now, Rebuild is sitting on hold. So all of you that are wondering, why should I get insurance? I don't need insurance. I'm going to give you a little story. I didn't need flood insurance either. I have a 2017 flood certificate that told me my house was in an X, my garage was in an AE. My homeowner's agent told me I didn't need flood insurance. Well, guess what? All the water came up from the back of my house and went around. I'm on Helm, which is in the middle of the Gondolier Peninsula. So, like I've told everybody, Harry met Sally and they had a little boy named Bob. Because the water came up from the canals, came from Northwest Creek, and then it came up from trade winds and Gondolier at the other end of Helm where all the swamp is. So, right now, water, which took us probably till 2020, didn't even realize was probably up to my plywood. So, all the tile in my master bath is now cracked where each piece of plywood used to lie. So I'd advise everybody, whether you need it or not, next month I'm 6 years. Now Rebuild's on hold. So,
Thank you.
Ray, I do have a question. So what you're saying is before we go to the PCC, we have to fill out an application for drainage. And basically, just to reiterate, I don't currently have a swale in the front of my house. My neighbor next door does. It did absolutely nothing for Florence. I don't get any water, so, and it's my understanding that, because they are tearing down my house to rebuild it, and I will be homeless. So, the reason why I'm asking is I'm trying to get all my questions now. My legal aid attorney is retiring next month. So my hands are full. So I'm just, because I didn't know that I had to go through drainage before I went to the PCC.
It's one process. You're gonna need an engineer, you're gonna need a surveyor.
Well, that's not me, that's, Rebuild NC and whoever takes the bid.
But that's what you're gonna need.
That's what you're going to need, whether it's you personally or someone that gets hired to work with you, doesn't matter who it is. The requirements we have call
So
for-
basically just fill out the application. And then they'll give it to you and then it goes back to them.
We have to approve the building, I mean, the preparation of the lot and the drainage from the lot before it goes to the PCC for the permit for the building.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to urge everybody to take cookies. We don't want to bring it back.
Oh, we got one more
Can I
question
add one
here.
thing to something that she said? One thing that I do want to add is that an insurance agent prior to Florence may have been doing things a whole lot different than post-Florence. So one really valuable lesson that I personally learned, and I just want to share this with you, and I'm so sorry that for what you've been going through, But pre-Florence, if someone wasn't in a flood zone, I may have said it's not required. That might have been my answer to you. It's not required, you're not in a flood zone. Today, post-Florence, every single person who our agency does a homeowner's quote for, we also do a flood quote, and if they decline it, we have them sign something saying that they decline.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Just so you know, because once they come in, tear down my house and rebuild it, I will then have to come up to code, which will be raising it 2 feet. On the other side of that, once I go and sell my house, and trust me, I plan on doing it quickly, once this is all over, I didn't put in 6 years of sweat, but from what I understand, the buyer coming in, if they don't maintain flood insurance on that house, and God forbid we have another Florence, they will get no help from FEMA. So going back to, I got $96,000 on my homeowner's insurance, you know, I would find out if there's a lifetime, because from what I understand, for me, this is a one and done.
Thank you.
Sam Curry, 903 Daggett Lane on the harbor side. Quick question. All of these new builders that Margaret had referenced, a lot of the houses they're building are built on slabs. Are they up to code as far as the height and everything? It seems to me that it's quite vulnerable.
They have to be. We don't really like slabs. Okay. Personally, I would never build a house on a slab. What we're finding them building now are stem walls. They're putting in footings, foundations, bringing up a wall, filling under it, and then pouring a slab. That does two things. That allows for much better control of grading around the house and how swales are going to work. There were several houses that were built up on fill, on a slab, on top of the fill. Now you got a situation where you lose a little of that control and you're creating steeper slopes next door to houses that may not have them. Right? They're both valid building processes, and I think the county has to prove them if they meet the building code. So is it smart to do that? Personally, I don't think so. But again, these are big builders who build a lot of houses, and the bottom line is dollars, not perfection.
We thank you very much for coming. Before we leave, we got a couple of things to say. Don't you talk, I know I did a great job. We have a lot of cookies we got to get rid of over here. So, Sam, we need you to lead the charge. Also, everybody here is concerned about stormwater, okay? Or you wouldn't be here. We can really use some more people to help us on the Stormwater Committee. You're not going to be out wading through the swamps and all that. You're going to be talking to people. You're going to be helping us evaluate. If you have any interest at all, please stop by the POA, get an application. We would love to talk with you, male, female, young, old, whatever. If I can be on it, anybody can. So, thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate it. Now you can applaud.